Autumn pulls the world inward, crisp leaves, early dusk, the sweet, silly promise of Halloween. But when the air cools, ordinary things feel a little off. The woman in the woods. Lucas saw a ghost. Not just any ghost, but a figure that looked exactly like a family member he had never met. And it all started with a simple hike in North Carolina. It happened in 2019. He remembered the year specifically because it was when he was living on his own in Asheville, North Carolina. He had moved there for a temporary job, and it was the perfect excuse to live alone for the first time. Lucas was 22 and fresh out of college with an apartment right downtown. He could walk to most places, but he kept his car for when he wanted to branch out or venture further out of town. What he loved about Asheville and North Carolina in general was the sheer number of hiking trails. He'd been to many of the local ones, but one he hadn't visited yet was DuPont State Forest. So one day, he decided to go. The drive was just under an hour from Asheville, and it was a random Wednesday in October. The leaves were starting to change, the perfect time for a hike. He didn't have work, and since it was a work day for everyone else, he figured he'd probably have the trails all to himself. He got to the parking area and found the trailhead. He walked for a while, and the trail was eerily serene. He was completely alone that day. It was cloudy, and there had been a lot of rain that week, which was why he wanted to go. The trail led to Triple Falls and High Falls, and he knew the waterfalls would be epic after all the rainfall. He only had to hike about 0.4 miles before getting to Triple Falls, which was a breathtaking sight. Fun fact, a scene in the Hunger Games had been filmed right here. He took a few videos and photos while sitting on a rock for a bit. Then Lucas noticed a woman in the woods near the trail. She was staring right at him. He waved at her, trying to be polite, but she just turned around and slowly walked deeper into the woods until she was out of sight. Honestly, he didn't give it a second thought. He had just started hiking, so he didn't sit for too long anyway. He got up and headed back onto the trail, avoiding climbing the waterfall's rocks because they were slick as ice. He continued ascending the trail and eventually reached the higher point of the falls, High Falls. He took a few more videos and photos here and sat on another dry rock. A sudden sense of déjà vu hit him when he saw that woman again, in the woods by the trail. She was once again staring him down. He didn't wave this time. Instead, he looked down at his phone, pretending not to notice or care. After maybe 10 seconds, he glanced back up. Just like that, she was gone. If he had to guess, the woman was around 55. She had short grayish blonde hair from the looks of it, but she was pretty far away, so he only got a distant impression. He didn't see which way she went, but whatever direction it was, Lucas wanted to go the opposite way. He kept walking and eventually came to another trail landmark, the covered bridge. He stopped again to take a scenic video and a few photos. After sipping some water, he looked toward the end of the bridge, the direction he had just walked from. And there she was. He swore she hadn't been there a second before. He also hadn't heard anyone walking behind him. She was still staring right at him, as if he were doing something wrong. Now he was getting annoyed. He started walking toward her and said, "Excuse me?" But she just turned around and started walking away. The pace at which she moved for someone her age was disturbing. For a moment he worried she might have a condition and needed help, but he couldn't bring himself to chase after her. Instead, he leaned on the edge of the bridge for a few minutes before deciding to turn back. He had already been hiking for about 45 minutes, and it would take another 45 to get back down to the car. Walking back down the trail in the direction the woman had gone, Lucas passed a younger woman walking her dog. He decided to stop her and ask if she'd seen an older woman pass by. She said no. Just needing to talk to someone about it, he explained how he kept seeing this woman popping out of nowhere, staring at him, and walking off. She laughed and said, "That's really strange." After sharing a laugh, he continued on his way. The entire way down, Lucas grew paranoid he'd see that woman lurking in the background again, but it was dead quiet. He passed one other person who gave him a friendly smile and a nod. Other than that, he made it back to his car undisturbed. Later that day, he went on a date with a girl he was seeing. They went to their favorite local bar for some pumpkin spice beers and to watch baseball. He told her about the woman on the trail and she found it amusing because, honestly, it did sound kind of funny. After that, he went home. That night, when Lucas was in bed, he woke up in the pitch black. He hardly ever woke in the middle of the night. He was a heavy sleeper. Still coming to, he heard something at the foot of his bed. When he looked up, a figure of a woman stood there. His stomach dropped. He screamed so loudly the neighbors could probably hear. Crawling against his headboard, he tried to put as much distance between himself and the figure as possible. Then she turned and walked out of the room. Lucas stopped screaming, trying to catch his breath and slow his pounding heart. He flicked on the lamp and shouted, "Who's there?" But there was only silence. Grabbing the knife from his nightstand, he jumped out of bed and flicked on every light in the apartment. No one was there, not in the closets, not behind the couch, not under the beds. So he did the only thing he could think of. He called his father. He needed to share what had just happened with somebody. His father groggily picked up the phone. After Lucas explained everything, his father said he must have hallucinated while half asleep. He said Lucas wasn't fully awake and could have been seeing things. Deep down, Lucas knew his father was probably right, but the image felt too real. Then he told his father about the woman on the trail and how the figure at his bed had actually resembled her. His father said, if anything, that only proved his point. Lucas' brain had conjured up a familiar image from earlier that day. Somehow, Lucas went back to sleep that night, barricading his bedroom door with the dresser just in case. 2 days later, his mom called. Her sister in Germany had died. Lucas had never met his aunt. She had been estranged from his mom, not having left Germany in over 25 years. His mom and uncle flew to Germany for the funeral. When she got back home, Lucas saw the funeral card with his aunt's picture. His heart nearly stopped. She looked identical to the woman he had seen on the trail and to the figure that had stood at the foot of his bed. The story shook his whole family, especially since he had told his dad about the trail incident and the hallucination before news of his aunt's passing even arrived. Lucas had been born Catholic, but never considered himself very religious. Yet this whole thing still sent shivers down his spine and made him question everything he thought he knew. Never go back. Max and his friend Carlos had a history of doing stupid things together. They had been friends since they were 10, and when they were 21, they became roommates in Brunswick, Georgia, where they both grew up. It was a little coastal town. It had its pros and cons, but for Max, it got pretty boring once they hit their 20s. Everyone in town knew about the creepy old house that stood out from every other house around. It looked like it had been built in another century. It had been abandoned for ages, and Max and his friends always made up ridiculous stories about its history. By mid-October, with everyone in full-on Halloween mode, haunted houses, corn mazes, everything, Max thought it would be a blast one Friday night to break into that house and explore. So after work, he and Carlos grabbed a couple of baseball bats, stopped for fast food and beers, and drove to the place. They parked way down the road so they wouldn't look suspicious. The houses in the area were spread out, which meant bigger properties and less chance of being caught snooping. Max shoved a few beers into his backpack, along with the baseball bats, trying not to look like trouble walking around late at night. They whispered as they made their way down the dark street, reaching the house in under 5 minutes. This part of the street was pitch black, no lights in the old house or the one across from it, not even a street lamp. Whatever light existed came from the few houses further away that still had lamps burning. From that point, they relied on flashlights. The front lawn was a mess of dirt patches and weeds. They circled around back, figuring the front was too obvious. Shockingly, the back door was unlocked. The windows weren't boarded, not even broken. Everyone knew it was abandoned, yet the place still stood untouched. They slipped inside. Without their flashlights, moving around would have been impossible. The house was larger than some of the neighbors, but the maze of cramped rooms made it feel claustrophobic. Carlos stepped into another room, leaving Max briefly alone. From the other side, Carlos called out, "Yo, there's still furniture everywhere." "Yeah," Max answered. This place must have been abandoned in a hurry. Everything looked ancient, like his grandmother's furniture, only untouched for decades. Exploring further, Max wandered into a narrow corridor lined with bedroom doors. He stepped into one tiny and suffocating, with a bed dominating most of the space. The drawers and closet had already been rummaged through, leaving behind nothing but junk. From upstairs, Carlos' voice echoed. He was heading up. "Okay," Max called back. Their voices stayed low, just loud enough for each other to hear. Max checked the second bedroom, equally cramped, before returning to the corridor. 2 doors remained, one to a bathroom, and another that opened to a long, dark stairway descending into a basement. He hesitated, then muttered under his breath, "Screw it, I'm going down." Each step groaned under his weight. Halfway down, Max froze. The faintest glow flickered from below. He killed his flashlight. The glow remained. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back. Any sane person would have bolted, but Max never claimed to be the sane one. He was the kind of guy who dies first in horror movies. At the bottom, he peered around the separating walls. 2 tall candles burned on a table, faintly illuminating the room. But that wasn't what caught his eye first. There, beside the table, a rocking chair moved steadily back and forth. Someone sat in it, turned away from him. Max's stomach dropped when he spotted the pale hand resting on the arm of the chair. Panic surged through him. He crept back up the steps, each groan and crack of wood too loud in the silence. Halfway up, he risked a glance back. The candle still flickered faintly. He pushed upward, almost free until one stair screamed under his weight. He froze, jaw clenched. Finally, he reached the top. The instant he turned to shut the door, he realized it was pitch black below. The candles were gone. The thought of them being snuffed out made his skin crawl. He closed the door quietly and tiptoed through the maze of rooms until he found the stairs. He called softly up to Carlos. No answer. With a sigh, Max climbed, whispering his friend's name. Silence stretched. At the top, he hissed, "If you're trying to scare me, stop. There's someone in the basement. We need to get out of here." Carlos finally stepped from the shadows of a room, face pale. "Are you serious?" Max nodded sharply. "They'll explain outside." "But I'm not kidding." They hurried downstairs. Any effort at stealth was gone. Max only wanted out. But as they neared the back door, both froze. A silhouette stood at the basement door. "Go! Go!" Max shouted. They bolted, sprinting into the night. Within 30 seconds, they were at the car, Max gasping for breath as he yanked it into reverse and sped off. On the ride back, he told Carlos everything in detail. All Carlos could manage was, "Yo, what the fake hey?" Over and over, disbelief matching Max's own. Neither of them believed anyone legally lived there, but Max was certain someone had been squatting in that basement. Who it was, he didn't know. He didn't care. He just never went near that street again. The Harvest House. It was October 1st, and that crisp, fresh autumn air was finally here. The kind that made Rebecca want to pull on a cozy sweater and drink something warm. It was her favorite season, and it was the first fall she and Carter were spending together in their new home. She had the idea to surprise him by decorating the place with all the fall and Halloween stuff before he got home from his late shift, just a small, cute gesture. Rebecca had picked up a few things from Marshall's, but she knew she needed more to really make the house feel right. That's when she remembered Facebook Marketplace. She typed in fall decorations, and one listing immediately caught her eye. It was a picture of a huge, overflowing green plastic storage bin. The description was short. Everything must go. Entire container of fall-themed decorations for cheap. The price was only $20. She figured if the container was even half full, it was a total steal. The seller also mentioned he was selling other stuff. Clearing out house. Everything must go. Check my profile. Curious, Rebecca clicked on his profile. The guy's name was Cody. His profile was basically a blank slate. Everything was private. His profile picture was just a close-up of a gray trucker's cap on a guy's head. The brim pulled so low his face was completely obscured. His cover photo was a blurry shot of a lake. The other listings were a seriously weird mix. An allegedly new iPhone for $700, some articles of women's clothing, and a box of Christmas decorations. The random assortment felt strange, but she was focused on the cheap holiday cheer. She messaged him asking what kind of decorations were in the bin. His reply was instant and frustratingly vague. All sorts. Tableware, outdoor decorations, etc. Rebecca told him she could come by today. He confirmed he'd be home later, closer to 9 p.m. once he was done with work. He sent the address. She pulled it up on Google Maps Street View. Honestly, the neighborhood wasn't the best, a little run down, but the house itself looked completely normal. In the Street View image, the lawn was kept nice and there were 2 cars in the driveway. It looked fine, so she agreed to the meetup. Still, she didn't want to go alone. Rebecca called her friend Sally and asked her to come with her just in case. She picked Sally up and they set off for the half-hour drive, chatting and catching up the whole way. Once they got off the highway and entered his town, Sally started half joking about how sketchy the area was. Rebecca knew what she meant. Everyone knew that town wasn't exactly the place you went for a leisurely evening drive. It was already dark, and streetlights did little to illuminate the residential side streets. As they neared the address, Rebecca's phone vibrated in the cup holder. She picked it up at the next red light, a new message from Cody on Messenger. It said, "When you get here, you can come right in." She showed the message to Sally. "What the hell?" Sally whispered. They both agreed it was incredibly uncomfortable. "Come right in." No way. They decided they'd ring the doorbell, and if he didn't answer, they'd just leave. They pulled up to the house. To Rebecca's surprise, there were no cars in the driveway now. Dim yellowish lights were on inside, barely visible through the closed blinds. She messaged Cody. "We're here. Can you come to the front?" They watched the house while she waited for a response. Then, at the exact same moment, Rebecca and Sally both saw it. The blinds on one window subtly shifted, like someone had just moved them a millimeter to peer out. The opening closed just as quickly as it appeared. A few seconds later, the front door slowly creaked inward, opening just a few inches. Cody's message came through right away. "I'm at the door. You can come in." The whole thing was unsettling, and Rebecca was deeply grateful Sally was with her. They got out of the car and walked toward the house. Before they got too close to the steps, Rebecca called out, "Cody?" A few times, silence. Sally tugged her arm and whispered, "We should leave. Seriously." Rebecca took a few steps closer and tried one more time, really loud. "Cody." Still nothing. She turned to Sally. "Let's go." As they started walking back toward the car, a voice deep, gravelly, and unnervingly close said, "Yes, I'm here." Inside, they spun around. A man was standing in the doorway, but only about half of him was visible. He was peering around the doorframe like he didn't want to be seen. He slowly gestured them inside with a hand that was barely visible. Cautiously, they turned back toward the house. As Rebecca got closer, he pulled the door fully open, then vanished from view. They walked up the steps and into the house, leaving the front door open behind them. The air hit them instantly, a strong, sickening scent. It was like the dusty, stale cotton smell of an old shut-up house, but with something else underneath, something deeply unpleasant and acidic. They heard fast, heavy footsteps moving away down a hallway and into an adjacent room. His voice, freakishly deep and low, called out, "It's over in here. Come here." Rebecca made sure Sally was right at her side before stepping into the room. It was a bizarre sight. A dimly lit living room with faded, depressing pink carpet and ancient furniture. But the smell in here was putrid. It truly reeked of actual decay, the smell of something dead and forgotten. In the center of the room sat a single red storage bin with a green lid. Cody was standing just over the container. This was the first time Rebecca got a clear look at him. He was tall, bulky, and had an intense, unfriendly look in his eyes that made the hair stand up on her arms. She realized instantly that this container was not the big green one from the Facebook ad. It was a completely different color and much smaller. He was silent, just staring at her. "Can you open it, please?" she asked, forcing herself to sound normal. He actually smirked. "Well, you're no fun." That comment was enough for Rebecca and Sally to start inching backward toward the front door. But then he lifted the lid. The very instant the seal broke, a wave of that putrid odor blasted into the room, instantly stronger and more foul than before. That was it. They bolted. They sprinted out the front door and didn't look back until they were a few houses down the street. Sally kept yelling for Rebecca to hurry up. By the time she managed to get the engine running, the front door of the house was already closed again. She didn't know if he was watching them through the window again, but they got out of there so fast, leaving a screech of tires behind. They never actually saw what was in that red container. But one thing was clear. It was definitely not decorations. When Rebecca told Carter everything, he asked for the address. She told him not to go, but he insisted he just wanted to look up the house. The next day, he came home late and told her he had actually stopped by the house in the afternoon. He said an older woman, maybe in her late 60s, answered the door and insisted she lived there alone. He knew Rebecca wasn't lying because she showed him all the Facebook messages and the address. When they looked up the property records, the owner was indeed listed as a woman in her late 60s. The whole thing remained an incredibly disturbing and unexplainable experience. Rebecca had no idea who that man was, what he was selling, or why he was in that house. She just knew that from then on, when buying anything online, she would stick to brightly lit, public places for meetups. Because sometimes, the real horror was in the things you almost saw.